to the Building Your Brand podcast. And in this solo episode, I wanted to chat about comparison culture in the creative industries. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently as I've seen some friction, some mocking online, people pulling apart other people's work. And honestly, it's made me feel really sad. And I think we are really consumed a lot of the time by this comparison culture. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's very natural to compare yourselves to others. We're constantly trying to get a sense of where we fit in an industry, in an ecosystem. Like we are assessing our skills. Am I more skilled than that person? Less skilled? Do I have more experience, less experience? There's something very normal about comparing and trying to understand where we sit. But when it goes wrong is when we compare, it makes us feel negative. And then instead of processing that negativity in a healthy way, we use it to lash out at others and hurt others, or we allow it to stop us from doing what we want to do because we are so overwhelmed and almost like paralyzed by this comparison that we've made and then not feeling good enough. And it's tricky. I think it's a really tricky one. I think it's a similar topic to when I interviewed Hannah and Lois on the podcast and we talked about jealousy. And I think, a lot of these things are very normal human emotions, but it's then how we choose to move forward and how we choose to react to them. Now, one of the things that I have noticed is that, and I guess this is like not so much comparison, but I think it does fall under that umbrella. But I notice that sometimes I am afraid of sharing my work and showing up online because of how other people might respond or what they might say to me, what they might do if they are hurting and they choose to lash out. So I have had some negative comments over the years, and they are often from men and they are often from people who, I don't want to say further behind, but like maybe haven't shared themselves or their work as much online. So not that they're further behind, but they're not trying to do the thing that I'm trying to do. And I don't know whether that is what fuels the negative comment. I don't know where it comes from, obviously everyone's different, everyone's got their own issues, but that sort of negativity does really affect how I show up online. And I think recently I saw an incident with other people, but I think we can be really influenced by that as well, that really sort of shocked me, I guess. And basically what happened is a very large creator with a large following did a mocking video or a parody video of another creator. So basically, reshot one of their videos frame by frame, but in a very kind of like making fun of them way. And I get that it's comedy, and I get that, I get the whole argument that, well, if you put yourself out online, you've got to be willing to take the good with the bad or the bad with the good. Like, I get all of those arguments, but I also feel like sometimes it's just bullying and sometimes it's just mean. And I guess it surprises me that that's what people want to like build their brand on. Like, I get why they do it. It gets so much engagement. Like, it's going to make the reel go viral. It's very sort of like, come see the gossip kind of vibes. But it just feels so icky to me. But like seeing that play out was like another reminder to me that there is a cost to putting yourself out there online, and there is a cost to sharing your work, and the cost is that you then have to deal with people's opinions. And I've definitely had this before where maybe like people have misinterpreted something that I've been sharing or something that I've been saying, and that's really hard because you can't always like go to the depth that you want to in a short video, and you can't always get back to everybody and explain it and give it the context. So that is the risk. The risk is someone is going to misunderstand what you're trying to say. Someone's going to misunderstand what you're trying to do. If I show a carousel post of a branding project that I've done, that's not a full case study. I'm not sharing the brief. I'm not sharing the back and forth with the client. Like, I'm not sharing everything that happened to get me to that final point point. And so there's a lot of context that's missing. So the risk is that something that I share is going to get misunderstood. I guess the plus side is that it's going to get me new clients, or people are going to see it, and like my work and follow me. Like there's good sides to it as well. And I guess like that is the reality of a lot of things in life. There's good and bad. I think sometimes when I watch people with big accounts and how they interact with each other, it's always been, I guess, something in the back of my head that I've desired. Like I want to grow my account bigger. I want more people to see my content. I would love to get more client work, or not even client work. Like I'm happy with the number of clients I've got, but I'd love to get more inquiries. And so, yeah, I guess with so much of this stuff is the question, at what cost? Like, am I willing to do this for that cost that I see? And I would really encourage you all to think about how comparison impacts you and how it makes you behave. One of the things that I do a lot is when I feel negatively towards someone else online, I always have to question, is it because I am jealous of what they've got? Or is there like a valid criticism there? And sometimes it's a mix of both. Sometimes there is a valid criticism. Sometimes I'm just jealous because something's going well for them. And then that is a clue to me as to what the thing is that I want. And one of the things that I've realized is that I will see something that someone else has. Let's say someone who's got 100K followers, and I see how they've grown that, and I see the type of content that they make, and I realize that I'm just not willing to make that sort of content. And so like I'm not willing to make that sacrifice to get the thing that I want, or I'm not willing to put in that work in the way that they have to get the thing that I want. And so in those instances, I have to make sure that when I'm comparing myself to others, I am not then channeling that in a negative way, in a leaving a snide comment way. I mean, I hope you know that I wouldn't leave a snide comment, but I have to make sure that I channel it in positive ways and not in negative ways. I think one of the other things that I've thought about a lot, and I chatted on a podcast about this with Nikki Denson, and that is about how just because someone else has something, that doesn't mean I can't have it too. Like, I think often we go into these situations comparing ourselves to others, and it sparks a negative feeling for us because we think that there's like a finite amount of that thing. So it's kind of like, well, if that creative over there has worked with these clients, or has done this, or has spoken at these events, or has had these opportunities, that means they're not available to me. And that just isn't true. And like, yeah, maybe there is a scenario where I can't speak at a particular event because they've just had another branding designer speak, but there's loads of other opportunities out there. And I think we often get sucked into this like lack mentality where it's like, well, if someone else has got this thing, then I can't have it. And that isn't the case. And I think we have to really, I mean, this sounds a bit like woo and stuff, but we have to go into it with an abundant mindset, like believing that the right opportunities are going to come our way. And that just because someone else has had something and had this amazing success, it doesn't mean that that's not possible for us. It doesn't take away from the fact that we can have it. And it might be in a different way. It might be in the same way. It's very likely going to be in our own way. But I think going into it thinking, oh, okay, that's really cool that that person did that thing. That's made me realize that's something that I would love too. And so now I'm going to work towards that instead of going into that spiral of like, oh, well, they've got it, and so now I hate them. Like, I just don't like what they're doing because now they've done it, I can't do it, all of this kind of thing. So, I mean, these topics are so complicated and messy, but I do think comparison in the creative industries is so difficult. And I think it makes us behave like not always in the healthiest of ways. And so I would really love to encourage you to ask yourself questions next time you feel like you are comparing yourself with someone else. What is being triggered for you? What are those feelings that are coming up? How can you channel that into something positive instead of something negative? Maybe you go and encourage that person that you're comparing yourself with, because they're probably behind the scenes having a total crisis and they will be comparing themselves with someone else. Maybe they're comparing themselves with you never know. And I just think we often suffer these things alone and we get in our head about it. And I think turning it into something positive, using it as an opportunity to go and encourage someone, to tell them that you love their work, that you think they're doing a great job, that can really reframe the whole sort of comparison issue for you. I think because the creative industries, we pour so much of ourselves into our work, and I think so often, unfortunately, our worth is tied up with our work. Everything feels more intense and everything feels like it's a bigger deal because it feels so personal. Like if I was just working a job where I inputted data into a spreadsheet, and I am not diminishing that, it's very important, but I think it's easier to be much more dispassionate about that sort of work because you're not making your whole identity usually about putting data into a spreadsheet, whereas when you're creative, so much of your identity and so much of your worth gets tied up in your work and what people think of it and how it's perceived. And so I think that is why these feelings often feel so much more intense and so much bigger a deal in the creative industries. And so I guess the encouragement is turn it into something positive, but also work on detangling that self-worth from your work and your creativity, and knowing that you are good enough as you are. You don't need to prove yourself to anybody, and it's normal to compare yourself to others. It's how we work out our place in the world. Just make sure you channel that into something positive instead of negative. I would love to hear what you think. Do you struggle with comparison? Is this something that you've noticed in the creative industries? Come tell me your thoughts. You can find me at Liz M. Mosley or at Building Your Brand Podcast on Instagram.